Hello, my name is Sally Burris. I am the CEO of Split the Difference. It is a new organisation, been registered and operational since July the 1st this year. It is the result of 5 years of research, and I'm here just to tell you a little bit about us, what we do, why we do it, and some of the information about what's motivated us. I've mixed it up a little bit. You've got some media as in video format, and you've got some presentation slides, some information. 5 years research is a lot of information, and it's not long in time. 30 minutes is not very long to share everything that I can. So at the end of this presentation, you will see some contact details. If you'd like to get in touch, say hello. There's a few different ways you can do that. Please don't hesitate. We welcome having conversations. The research was based on a program that we created, a whole family domestic abuse program. It's a licensed therapeutic intervention, and that's where this journey started. So what I've done is I've tried to present this as a beginning, a middle, and an end. I hope it makes perfect sense to you. If it doesn't, forgive me. But like I said, you're very welcome to speak to me and ask me some questions. The next video we launched on July the 1st. We did that by writing to the United Nations. There's a little bit of information in there about that. But then on September the 12th, then we wanted to make sure that we acted, not just sort of sat back and thought, okay, we've launched now, that's it, we'll just take our time. We wanted to be an active organisation that raised awareness in all the ways that we could. So we did a march from the Equality and Human Rights Commissioner's office in London to Downing Street on the 12th of September, as I said. And here's some information just about what that looked like.
London's Equality and Human Rights Commissioner has become the focus of a campaign march to raise awareness on the inequality for men and boys in UK law and services. Split the Difference, with other organisations and individuals from all over the UK, have begun a series of marches that will travel to Scotland, Ireland and Wales over the next few months.
Form a really strong alliance that's got a really good strategic build up to it, a structure that will sound, but will stand the test of time. We'll get the words out in a minute. Stand the test of time, because we'll know what we're doing and where we're going, because we'll have a very clear vision.
Over the last few weeks, the campaign has seen a rise in popularity, gaining followers from all over the world.
Women's services have had decades to get their act together. And there are so many great people. I'm so honoured to be in the presence of so many people doing such amazing work. But we do all need to come together now, band together, to be a strong force, a one voice, and true equality for not just for men and boys, but for women and girls as well.
Equal rights! Equal rights! Equal faith! Equal fight! Guilty murder! We say hands up!
Man's rights! Man's rights!
Their aim is to build a network of steering groups throughout the UN member states, which will highlight how their exclusion from legislation and services is placing men and boys in crisis.
Domestic violence! Kids need fathers!
Kids need fathers!
Domestic violence!
So the march ended up with a number of organisations all over the UK. We only had 6 weeks to advertise it. It wasn't a very long time. We were very surprised by the turnout. At the end, a few of us, as you can see, stuck around, and we had some some photos done, some media done, some recording, and also got a chance to meet each other and have a discussion about the different kinds of work that we were doing all over the UK now. How all of this started was, like, as I said to you, about 7 years ago, I, with another group of organisations as a consortium, won a procured contract with the Police and Crime Commissioner in South East Wales to create a whole family domestic abuse service that was centred around the children. The organisations involved in that were all kind of, they were, I guess, high-end organisations, college, a children's charity, quite a large children's charity. At the time, I was running an organisation called Steps. We were delivering supporting people services here in the UK and had done for a very long time. The intervention was the 24-week intervention we created. As I said, it was centred around the children. Part of what I brought to it was I didn't want that to be a gendered intervention. After delivering housing-related homeless services, and they were generic floating support services that worked with people who, and individuals and families who were experiencing social issues that were preventing them from maintaining a home. So things like child protection, debt management, drug and alcohol, offending issues, you know. There was a myriad of reasons why we were supporting people. But one of the things, after 15 years of delivering these services, I realised that there were no services for men and boys. And so it was very difficult for organisations like mine to be able to support them in the same way I would women and girls. So when we got to create this, we won this funding to create a whole family domestic abuse service. What I brought to the table was for it not to be gendered. And that service is a licensed service. It is a 24-week intervention. It works with high-end domestic abuse. And the pilot had some excellent achievements from it. It was a licensed product. The Police and Crime Commissioner in the UK originally wanted it to be replicable throughout the whole of Wales. And one of the requirements for that was for it to be licensed. So we would, in effect, train organisations to be able to deliver it. Once the pilot had gone through, we then were in the role of looking for funding, additional funding to deliver it, and also to show organisations what it could do and how it could do it. And hopefully, you know, in the Police and Crime Commissioner's intention was organisations would pick up on this service and they would deliver it also. Unfortunately, when I took this into the community and into the normal networking realms of delivering services, we were actively blocked, unfortunately, by women's services. In my ignorance, and after delivering service for a very long time, I did think that this wouldn't happen. Unfortunately, it did. So I did a 3-month piece of research, because after about 6 months of attempting to take this into organisations and getting involved with the Welsh Government and other services, I thought, okay, enough is enough. You can't continue to get this kind of welcome, shall we say, and these blocks from female services. So I did 3 months research with the view that I would provide a document to the National Assembly for Wales and its Assembly members to go and meet with them and tell them something about it. My intention, to be honest, was to climb over services and third sector and charitable organisations and take this to the government and show the government what it was. That research lasted for 3 months, and in that research I went into areas that I'd never gone into before. I knew that I would need to remove some barriers while having that conversation with the politicians. I knew I would need to provide them with evidence that whole family work was relevant. We already had acts of law like ACEs and other kind of legislative guidance that was leading us towards being able to deliver this and not have a gendered approach. But I still knew through meetings and stuff and structures I'd been involved with before, I knew that I would need to make sure that there was enough evidence to have that conversation and be listened to. through that research, I gone down like 3 or 4 layers. So instead of looking at kind of level stuff like what's needed, who needs it at a local level, or looking at kind of localized general statistics, I really dived into how legislation work together, how policies work together, how hospital policies and housing policies link together to deliver services, particularly for men and boys, because this was the sticking point. Now, I went to the assembly. Actually, the assembly members invited me to do a presentation. We had a big event in their central hall, but the research didn't end. I couldn't let it end, because once you start understanding how things work and understanding how the environment completely blocks men and boys from receiving the same sorts of services and the same kind of equality that women and girls do, you just can't stop. Well, I couldn't stop. So what I did was I spent 12 months looking at the interaction between legislation and guidance and policy. I looked at consultation processes. I looked at strategic planning at a local and national level. I asked questions. I spoke to the police. I spoke to social services. I spoke to domestic abuse services. I spoke to health services, because while this started with a domestic abuse, it quickly turned into looking at equality generally as a whole. So after about 12 months, I started to realise that there was something very, very wrong with the UK, that we weren't supporting men and boys, and there was no pathways to support. There was no pathways for men who were thinking of committing suicide, for young boys who were falling out of education. There was no pathway for domestic abuse for men. I knew that there was issues delivering my services. I had to do pro bono work for men and boys when I was delivering whole family kind of, floating support services. But I thought it was just me, and even though I was part of strategic planning groups and things like that, still believed it was just my environment, my community issues that were localized, and it wasn't. After 12 months sitting in the chair, I thought, okay, this is crazy. UK's got it wrong. Creating the whole family domestic abuse intervention, we had linked with New Zealand and Australia as part of the work because of the restorative practitioners' role within that and the practices. We had linked with them. So I thought, okay, let's have a look. It must be best practice. My research then ended up looking at Australia and New Zealand, thinking that UK had got it wrong, but maybe Australia and New Zealand got it right. So I kind of replicated what I'd done in the UK in a very shortened version. Because by the time I'd done this with the UK, I'd already had a program of how to look for that research. So I'd looked at New Zealand and Australia, and then I realised they got it wrong too. There was no equality there, no equal pathways, no equal narrative, no consultation process that adequately included men and boys. They'd also got it wrong. By this time, I thought, okay, so that's 3 countries down. Let's have a look for best practice somewhere else, because that's what I was doing. I wasn't looking for an issue. I was looking for best practice. So I ended up looking at Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America. I looked at some Arab countries, some African countries, because there was this premise inside me that sometimes when something is, somebody has nothing, the community itself will have best practice within its own communities. Couldn't find anything there. I looked at some European countries. I looked at Denmark, I looked at Sweden. Sweden's got some very nice policies, but still not the same. So in about year 2 or 3, I kind of realized that this was like global. It was a global issue. It wasn't just simply 1 country, 2 country. I ended up looking at over 15 countries to do this. And the next question I asked myself was, what is influencing this world where the narrative says that women and girls need equality, but in actual fact, the statistical evidence and anything that is an educated exploration of need is saying that it's men and boys who need the focus. They need to be drawn into these pathways to walk beside women and girls while they are getting their needs met, whatever those needs were. Because at the end of year one, it became equality because I looked at health, education, I looked at housing, I looked at family law, I looked at offending, because some of the court processes within all those countries, they were treating men differently than they would women who had committed the same crimes. So the question was how and what is influencing this inequality for men and boys. By this time, part of me wanted to let it go. I know that sounds ridiculous, right? Because when you know what you know, it just seemed like such a huge thing. I mean, for 6 months, okay, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. There's this thing around denial. You can't believe when you see a narrative that is wrapped up in everything, you know, in what you eat and breathe, and the adverts on the television, and, you know, the dramas that you're going to see in all the countries that you are in. The narrative, you know, it paints a picture where women are always either vulnerable victims or in need of something, okay? Men are always perpetrators, loud characters who get everything they want, okay? And they tend to always be the negative connotation. They're not the positive, as pretty much a whole, really. So there's a point where I want to let it go. And then I had this thing around knowledge brings responsibility, okay? You can see knowledge and you can see truth. You can't run away from it, though. And even when there was times when I'm thinking, how can you deal with the whole world thing, you know, I knew that I had to progress because I couldn't just ignore it. You just can't, you know, you've got two choices. You either turn your back on that and you live with that, or you do something about it. Now, the influences on what was making this the way it was. For the UK, it was a number of things because EU law come in on it. And you know, there's a few mechanisms that are outside influences. But when it was an international issue, that was every country I looked at, every single one, all right? I realised there was a global influencer there somewhere. And what was that going to be? You know, what would that be? And I ended up looking at UN. It was the only thing that I thought that could be kind of influencing so many countries. So I looked at UN policy. Now, looking at the UN was quite hard because it, in general terms, for Jane Public, who doesn't know about services and legislation and how it's created and monitored and all that, the UN is kind of the guiding light for equality and humanity and human rights, and it's the connection, and it's the arbitration, and it's the consultation, and it's, you know, it's the negotiation. They are to some degree viewed as the heroes of the moment. You know, they respond to global disasters. You know, when people are starving, they're the ones who put that out. So there was a disbelief in me that the UN policy would show any inequalities at all. I couldn't have been further from the truth. But so what I looked at was, I looked at their governance. I looked at how they influenced all of these countries. And I did the same exercise by looking at their guidance, you know, how they guide laws, how they incorporate that in everything they do. Everything that comes out of the UN, I looked at how they incorporate the basic needs, which is equality, diversity, human rights. This sent me on a journey, and the only way that I can reflect this to you really is just to choose one thing, because there's so much and it's impossible to show you everything here. And I am sure these presentations that you will see as part of the conference have got a lot of information that I would end up duplicating. I am absolutely sure. So what I did was I picked out the one element in here that was probably one of the most profound things that I came across, okay? If you go on the sustainable goals on the UN website, okay, you will see goal 6. It is water, all right? You've got a lot in the sustainable goals. It's where domestic abuse sits, it's where human rights and lots of other stuff sits, but you will see water. Now, in water, because I was looking, by the time I looked at the UN, I wasn't only looking at their legislation, I was looking at narrative, okay? Because remember I talked about layers. Everything has its layer. The way we communicate ourselves and what we want or need to anybody has layers. So you've got, for example, I'm using media, but my language I use, you know, whether I use he or she, you know, those kinds of narratives. So I really finely tuned all of the work that I did, all the research I did. I wasn't only looking at legislation, I was looking at the way it was written. I was looking at who influenced it. I was looking at who was used as a consultation towards it, you know, what departments, what individuals. So I really pulled everything apart like a microscope. Now, on water, okay, there is the achievements are by 2030. All the sustainable goals are by 2030. Now, in water, there's one section 6.2, you're seeing on the screen now. It says that by 2030, the United Nations member states will achieve access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all. It says that it'll pay specific attention to the needs of women and girls. It does mention those in vulnerable situations, okay? Now, this was one of the things that I pulled out, I extracted and really kind of put it under the microscope. And the reason being, water is a fundamental need of all human beings. And it doesn't really matter which country you're in. It is a fundamental requirement, okay? And it's one of those things, whether you're a woman or a man, a girl or a boy, you want it, you need it, you have to have it. So I was interested to find out, and in my, I guess, my investigation of the UN, I had a look at this one clear point. Now, I looked at statistics underneath this. So I looked at World Health Organization. I also pulled in a lot of other statistics, looking at death recorded, not only with the World Health Organization, but with other organizations that were on ground level. But one of the things that one of the things that gripped me and motivated me to make sure that this campaign was led right to the end was this one point. For your purposes, what I've done as a presentation is I've pulled out the statistics that the World Health Organization, who are situated in New York's headquarters for the UN. And the reason that I've pulled these two is because they work together, okay, and they feed each other. And it seemed equitable that I would use the World Health Organization's own statistics to show this particular point, okay, in the sustainable goals for the United Nations. So if you go on to the 2016 figures, which I can also share with anybody if you would like them. They are not always easy to find, especially if you've never looked for them before. But if you go on to look at these statistics, I've extracted from the death statistics for sub-Saharan Africa. And the reason I did this was because the sustainable goal that I've mentioned, it's kind of derived from, the best way to describe this to you really is that the United Nations seems to like to quote sub-Saharan Africa, and I get why. It's because probably every social issue or health issue or need you would ever find all over the world will be in one of the sub-Saharan African countries, okay? And I think a lot of the evidence that is used, they use from that region. So what I did was I took the statement from the UN and then I looked at the death rates for people within sub-Saharan Africa in connection to water-related issues, okay? And I wanted, and when I first did this, I did it because I was praying that I would find a justification for that statement about women and girls, okay? I need to say here at this point is I would never, ever, ever in my whole life want to take any need away from anybody. I don't care who you are or where you're from, okay, or what gender you are. So I pulled and extracted these statistics for you, okay. Now, the header is, how can leadership dare to be biased? And the reason is, all of the items that you're going to see, okay, related to deaths in 2016 and before, diarrhea, malaria, all of these, yellow fever, all of those, they're all related to dirty water. Okay, they are illnesses and sicknesses you can get from defecated water or from water that's been contaminated in some way, human feces, animal feces, you know, there's lots of ways it is. Now the statistics side by side, there's kind of no relationship really. I mean, for diarrhea, for example, as you can see, 342,026, forgive me, brain glitch, higher in men than they are in women, okay? The next one, 10,963, higher in men than they are in women. The next one down, malaria, is slightly lower in men than it is in women, okay? Not much of a difference. The next one down, again, slightly lower in men than it is in women, not much of a difference. The next one down, again, this one is marked higher, double higher, over double higher. Next one down, slightly lower than it is for women. Next one down, slightly lower for women. Again, next one down, yellow fever, a lot higher for men than it is for women. On the site, it's got other infectious diseases. Now, as you can see, for men, it's higher. Now, overall, dirty water kills more men and boys than it does women and girls. Okay. Now, all the research that I did said that that statement shouldn't be in there. Okay. If you base governance on statistics and evidence, that statement shouldn't be in there. Or if it is in there, it should include men and boys. Now, is one of the examples of how narrative and language can influence the perspective of a community. And I'm talking about a leadership community here, all right? So that was one example. I wanted to show a couple of other examples of statistics and evidence that's come out of the United Nations. And the reason I wanted to do this was because my research covered all areas. It wasn't just health. It wasn't just, as I've said before, don't repeat myself, self-harm or whatever. So these are the statistics, kind of clear statistics. And the reason I've pulled these out is because one of the things in my research showed that all over the world, in every single country, without exception, right, there are the height of suicide for men and boys is higher than women and girls. The lowest is 2 out of 3. The UK is one of those. The highest is 5 out of 6. So in one of the countries, there's 5 out of 6 suicide on men or boys. There are a number of boys at the age of 10 who commit suicide, but there are younger as well. Okay, it's quite an abhorrent fact, and it's a red flag kind of thing that I don't know how people can kind of let it go and say it means nothing, or we've not flagged it up and done a mass worldwide campaign about why it is. It just beggars belief, really. One of the other things is interpersonal violence. Now, this is a statement used for family violence. As you can see, self-harm in sub-Saharan Africa, these figures were taken from sub-Saharan Africa. Self-harm here is double than it is for men, for women and girls. Interpersonal violence, then you've got over 80,000, nearly 81,000 deaths, as opposed to just under 25,000. So when you look at policy and strategic planning, and you look at governance that comes out from these influences, it doesn't match the statistical evidence that lies beneath it. So out of all the research that I completed over the 5 years, one of the things that became quite evident is that there are common denominators all over the world. They are the key points that actually show the strongest part of where inequalities rest. So, for example, legal representation. This was a twofold thing. So you've got family court, where you've got services that are geared up towards divorce, care of the children, parent alienation, those kinds of contributors to a family, man or woman, going through those processes. They showed inequality for men and boys, for sure. In actual fact, my belief is that those services should be centred around the children. I also believe that there should be an assumption that parenting will be shared. It won't be with one parent or the other. Unfortunately, in court processes in all the countries we looked at, this was definitely biased and definitely favoured women and girls. I say girls because you've got some young girls, 18, 20, going through court processes in relation to their children and family care. You've also got the other associated services that are linked with that, so children's services, things like that. Education is a given. We all know that in the UK, for example, we know there's more boys dropping out of school. I know Eston is in a, and its inspectors actually are in a state of concern and have been voicing that for quite a number of years. So we know boys. We also know in further education in university, we've got 20% more dropouts in the UK, but these things are echoed in every country I looked at. Health, you could use the UK for an example if you want to. If you look at the health screening services that are available for women and girls, you will understand that they are not available for men and boys. So there are key health issues, for example, breast cancer, prostate cancer. Women and girls will go through structured, time-served assessments that men don't even do unless they have an issue. And while we know there's certain health conditions that are equal to women, men just don't get served with them. There's loads of examples. I mean, I could pull loads up. Police and associated services, you know, if you're looking at domestic violence, as soon as, I mean, in the UK, I know this is the same all over the world. I've looked at the belief system, the narrative that is thread throughout all of these systems is the same. I mean, that with regards to domestic abuse, for example, when you walk into a police station as a man and you disclose, you are firstly not likely to get heard. And even if you are heard, there is systems behind the scenes that men wouldn't necessarily see or understand or know what's going on, but they're actually screened. Men are screened first to see whether they're actually the perpetrator who's lying. This doesn't happen for women. And there are other associated services around the police. It's not just domestic abuse and those kinds of things. It's also mainstream offending. You've got situations, for example, I'll talk about the UK because I'm here, but I can tell you now it's mirrored in other countries. In police, in the associated services and the way police operate, there are alternatives to custodial sentencing that are clear, funded, very clean opportunities for women so they don't go into prison. Domestic abuse is one of them. So while men are given perpetrator programs, women are not given programs, they're given alternatives. And we know most recently, additional funding that's been made available for that. In other contexts as well, if you get two people, a man and a woman, who have been a perpetrator of violence or any other kind of offending issue, really, and you watch that case going through court, you will see that the woman's case is dealt with a lot differently to the men. It takes women a long time to end up in prison, whereas it may take a man 2 or 3 offences. So you can see them. If you lay them side by side, they're very visible. Right, biggie. I won't go through all of these, but I want to go through statistical gathering and reporting. Now, this was one of the areas I looked at, and the reason being is because the way statistics are generated, the way they're gathered, the way they are kind of assessed and then made public, that process is anybody who works in this field, you'll know, it leaves you speechless. And forgive me for just being speechless for a moment, but I will give you an example, okay? When I started this research, one of the people that I spoke to was the statistics organisation in the UK, which is the ONS, Office of National Statistics. Now, at the time, they were gathering domestic abuse statistics, and at the time, there were 3 women's aid projects that were feeding those statistics. There was the police, there was victim support, there was no men's support group. Okay, so the people that were feeding statistics in, which the government were then using to influence legislation, policy, strategic planning, fiscal spending, local authority, small, community-based local area funding and planning, all of that. It takes part of the permissions and quite a large part of the permissions for it to do whatever it decides to do is the statistics of the ONS. They will constantly quote them. Now, in relation to domestic abuse, those statistics were dominated by women. And the reason is, it's not enough that there was 3 women's aid groups that were feeding those statistics and no men's group. That wasn't just the issue. When a woman presents to the police, she can be either 2 figures, 2 calculations, or she can be 5. Okay, because a woman in the UK who presents, and this is the same in other countries, she'll be a police statistic, she may possibly be a victim support statistic, and then she may be a women's aid statistic, depending on what pathway. Normally, she's at least 2. It is normal that she's over that, but she is at least 2 figures. Now, she can also be a MAPA or MARIC, so she could potentially be 5 figures. Now, there are occasions, pretty rare ones, where a man will also be part of the security, keeping him safe. So he may be part of MAPA or MARIC, but it is very, very, very rare. In actual fact, a man is normally 1 statistic. Now, the reason I'm telling this is because those statistics are multiple statistics. There's no mechanism that says that woman is only 1 statistic when she is connected on 1 incident to 2 or 3, 4 or 5 agencies that are associated with police services. Now, I rang up the Office of National Statistics and said to them, I'm going to be writing a campaign and I want to gather statistics and I want to feed them to you. I want to do that in a way that is unchallengeable. Please tell me what I need to do. So I need to know how I need to be accredited to gather those statistics and how you will audit me, because I will set up my audit processes right at the beginning and make sure I capture everything and I do them in an unbiased way and I will do them the best I can. They told me, you don't need to do that. I said, that's wrong. I must have to be accredited and I must have to be audited because these very figures govern our country. No, she said. I rang back because I couldn't believe it. I thought I must have had somebody new or somebody who didn't know the job well, new employee. I rang back and I asked to speak to a manager. And I said the same thing and I was told the same thing again. I still didn't believe it. I sat back in the chair and I thought, that can't be true. This simply cannot be true. I rang back a 3rd time and asked to speak to a top manager in the department that looks after domestic abuse, because that was one of the ones I was doing the research for. And she said to me, no, you don't need to be accredited and we don't audit you. Now, for me, that's a crime. I still can't believe it. So I sent them an email. I asked for the email address, sent them an email, and I said to them, I'm going to be writing a campaign. It's around equality for men and boys. You are part of the problem. Because the way you manage the gathering and the management of your statistics, you are part of that issue. And so that they're in this presentation as well. There are others, as you can see, human rights, equality, housing, because men are treated differently when approaching housing. In the UK, for example, there are certain criteria for emergency housing. Where parenting is concerned, it's a vicious cycle, because if your children are part of children's services, you cannot have those children, you cannot care for them, look after them unless you've got a stable home. You can't get a stable home and a support for housing here unless you meet a criteria, and a part-time father is not good enough. So there's lots of issues around housing, so that's another reason. So because of those common denominators, they've become the 13 aims of the campaign. They will be the areas where you will see us producing media, talking to people, watching what goes on within legislation and other things. It's where we are very interested in groups who are working. It's a very broad umbrella of areas, but they are fundamentally the same denominators amongst all of them. So we're currently working with countries who have connected with us already, which is pretty amazing given we've only been going since July 1st. We are looking to set up committees in every single country, and I will do that. I will keep pushing that forward as much as I can. Those organisations will then mirror what we're doing here. For example, we've just set up a petition to go to Parliament, requesting that Parliament review all of its legislation, policy, strategic planning, fiscal spending to either include men and boys or to be gender neutral. We want to duplicate that in other countries, but we believe that, you know, we celebrate diversity, genuinely celebrate diversity in different cultures and belief systems, and there's no way on this planet how could I ever really understand the cultural narrative and there's some very clever people in the world. We just want to draw them in. So we've got specific roles for the committees, and we're currently looking at that. We have got 11 countries who are making inquiries with us, which is amazing. We want to link those countries with specific aims, like petitioning the governments where it's safe for them to do that, because we know not all governments are safe. So where it's safe to do that, we want to set up a committee that will petition, raise awareness, give men a voice, do some projects with young people, media, filming, and just get involved with the narrative. And the biggest thing is to educate, because really, these people who are in high positions, they really don't know, which is kind of like, wow, you know, but they really don't know. And how we're going to move forward, we have to fundraise, which is a killer. We need specific specialist people, it's a struggle. For this presentation, all I will say is it's a real struggle, And we've set up a shop, and we want to sell some products, and we're going to set up a shop on Amazon to continue doing that. Don't like asking anybody for anything. Kind of hoping somebody's got lots of money and says, Sally, we buy it, we get it, we know what equality means, and we're going to support you. But apart from that, I don't really know how we're going to do it. And for sure, it is a real struggle. It's a real struggle. We want to, one of the promises is that we will never, ever, ever publish anything that is not backed by evidence. Evidence looks like statistics, which we know we can't rely on, except for that they are at least something to start from. And frontline evidence from people who are doing the work, you know, and from people who are experiencing the issues that are related to men and boys not having equality. We won't be looking at anything, even the stories that people tell. They will be verified stories. And if I ever make a mistake, or anybody that's working with me makes a mistake, any of our journalists or our media people, we will be the first people to publish that. Because one of the things I've recognized is the only way that we can try and raise awareness is to be honest. And I've spent about 18 months on risk management, just to make sure I get everything right, and to make sure that all of the statistics and all of the facts are verifiable, and everything I say is verifiable. And the thing is to never give up on the truth. It's always undeniable. It simply is, you know.
We appear to have reached a point in humanity where the quiet suffering of men and boys is actually viewed as acceptable to ignore by many governments and organisations. Many of us here work in the field of domestic abuse. Each time a government minister stands up to talk about domestic abuse, or a new campaign is launched, a new law introduced, or another media article published that only recognises women and girls as victims, it sends a very loud and clear message to male victims that they are invisible and that nobody cares are being bombarded by societal messages that label them at fault via their toxic masculinity. I look at you all here today and I'm incredibly proud to call you my friends and colleagues. Each and every one of you are a shining light in a dark landscape for male victims. We will not bend to the negative social stereotypes of party lines that seeks to divide us into two camps, squabbling over the financial scraps and misinformation that is thrown at us. We are stronger together. You and your organisations are the future of true equality, and I'm humbled to stand with you here today. Can you hear us, Prime Minister? Thank you all.
Okay, so the last slide, the animation one, is a project we're running that we're going to run all year. We are building up a series of animated stories. Some of them will be really challenging. Some of them are about men and their experiences as they move through the world. Some can be really kind of harrowing. We've got a pretty harrowing story at the moment that we're working on. The email addresses that is attached to this slide, telephone numbers, our social media accounts, welcome to contact us in any. If you would like to work in partnership with us, or if you'd like to know something about what we're doing, some of the projects about working with young people and things like that that we've got planned, providing we get funding, of course, and some of the international stuff. Or if you're a journalist who wants to donate time, or somebody who really believes in what we're doing, because we really are desperate for help, more than this smiling face is telling you, actually. But it's we'll keep going. We'll keep going. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. If you've got a story to tell, we will come and film you, even if you're in a different country. We're building up contacts with other people that we can come and tell your story. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us no matter what. I hope you enjoy this conference. It's a brilliant idea. I hope the people who've managed to put it out do really well. I know some of them and they've been amazing. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.